Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Deadpool and Wolverine once again take the top spot away from Alien Romulus. Alien Romulus having a decent hold, definitely not the best of holds out there, but at 61%, it's already holding better than the last time an Alien film came out, and right now is set to make a decent amount of profit if these numbers continue to come in. I know there's been a lot of criticism of this movie, but as someone who actually enjoyed the film myself, I can say I think most people going to see it I've had a pretty good time with it. It has been a thrilling experience, and a lot of people have been having fun, and the numbers seem to be reflecting just that. The numbers also seem to be reflecting, though, that when it comes to hardcore fans, yeah, they're not showing up for this movie, or those that have shown up are definitely not showing this film any love. And so we'll talk about that, but we'll also talk about a couple of new releases. In fact, 3 new releases. We have Blink Twice from Amazon, only making $7.3 million in its domestic opening. So single-digit openings there for that movie, which apparently, at least according to the guys over at Film Threat, is just not a great film, pushes a lot of political ideology, for instance, has a really interesting, very on-the-nose message in an era when, of course, we know audiences love to be preached to in every single moment of the time, but Blink Twice doing only $7.3 million, but because of a very, very, very small budget, Blink Twice is not completely out of the realm of making money back at this point. The Forge from Sony is also in conjunction with Affirm, so a faith-based movie here, $6.6 million at only 1.8 thousand, I don't know why I said that, 1,800 screens. So a pretty good per theater ratio there, right? Really just does a lot better per theater versus even Blink Twice, and it ends with Us. So definitely some good numbers there. And then coming out of the top 5, that's where we have to go all the way down to the number 8 spot before we get to the opening weekend for the remake of The Crow, making only $4.6 million. Yes, that's right. A brand new film in 2024, The Crow, a remake that no one asked for, and apparently no one is going to see. And from what people have told me, the film is not even really even The Crow, lost to Coraline's second weekend in its 15-year anniversary re-release. Now, don't get me wrong, Coraline is a phenomenal movie, but for a film from 15 years ago, in the second weekend of its special release, to do better than a brand new film in 2024 that has at least some name recognition attached to it, yeah, kind of just shows you exactly where this film and also where the current box office stands in this regard. Also, Coraline being a Fathom Events picture. So again, kudos to them for being able to do that. But The Crow only coming into the single digits means, yeah, this film guaranteed to be a box office failure because of a very sizable budget for the kind of movie that we have gotten. But before going any further though into these numbers, please make sure that you smash that like button, allow that fire button over on Aussie, smash the rumble button as well. Also, make sure that you are subscribed, hit that bell, that way you get notified every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So as you can see, we have here, of course, from thenumbers.com, starting off here instead of Deadline because it's a pretty slow weekend, so Deadline doesn't have really anything to add to this discussion. But Deadpool Wolverine has now been out for 5 weeks and has made another $18.3 million, bringing its total domestic to $577.2 million. That is very impressive. Right now, easily tracking towards $600 million at the domestic, probably an endpoint domestically of $600 to $650, and it is still, at this point of release, actually still ahead of where Inside Out 2 was at the same point of its release. Now, I have been saying now for quite a while that I do think you're going to have Deadpool Wolverine start to slip underneath Inside Out 2's domestic numbers. And again, there's a lot of reasons for that I've talked about before on this channel. I think the rated R versus PG alone is a bit of a factor there. But still, nonetheless, the fact that 5 weeks out, right, Deadpool Wolverine still has a higher overall domestic than where Inside Out 2 was after 5 weeks is still very, very impressive, right? There's just no other way to say that. I do think that you're going to see that film, though, Inside Out 2, start to take over and take advantage over Deadpool Wolverine probably over the next week or so, because it's within about $7 million. So we're talking about less than $10 million separating where those two films are in the case of Deadpool Wolverine and where the film was in the case of Inside Out 2. Inside Out 2 was able to leg out to $646 million and is still in theaters, right? Still making money. So still holding pretty strong despite the fact that it's, been lost from most of its theaters. And also just the fact that Inside Out 2 has also been now available on PVOD platforms and other things like that. So, hey, Kudos to Disney for doing well in both of these regards. But with that $646 million being after where that film was after 11 weeks, that's why I think Deadpool Wolverine after 11 weeks will probably be $600 to $650 million if I had to guess. But that does ultimately mean that the crown for biggest movie of 2024 is probably still going to be Inside Out 2, making $1.6+ billion. And we'll talk about where that film ultimately is at this point in time, because again, 1.7 is definitely not off the table. In fact, let me go ahead and just check that live right now. Yeah, 1.649. Yeah, 1.7 is not off the table for this movie, but obviously it is slowing down quite a bit. It is not going to make that much more, but the fact that the box office run is essentially done and it's still making as much as it is just, again, impressive. There's just no other way to spin that number. So again, kudos to Inside Out 2 for being able to do as well as it is. You also have another film next to it, Trap, coming out at 4 weeks now. This movie also seems to be towards the end of its run from Warner Brothers, dropping 800+ screens after 4 weeks of release. A movie that's not going to be the biggest box office loser in the world, but it's also not going to be much of a moneymaker either based on the numbers that we currently have. Let's go ahead and look at the worldwide numbers here for a second. So Deadpool Wolverine, $1.2 billion. So as expected, this film continues to just crush along both at the domestic and international box offices, right? So $1.2 billion. I think the film still has enough gas in the tank to be able to leg out to be somewhere around $1.3 billion. I mentioned before, right? An end point of between 1.3, 1.4, probably closer to that 1.3 billion. So for a rated R film, very impressive. And also in the history of rated R films, even when you adjust those films for inflation, this movie is definitely going to be up there and is going to be a part of that overall discussion, right? $577 million as of the recording of this video. In the domestic market, $634 million in the internationals, and that really is going to be, I think, the biggest difference between this movie and what you had with Inside Out 2. Inside Out 2, because of its more universal appeal as a, again, PG film. Again, I know that there's some people that just can't quite understand why that is a factor, but it is when you are limiting the amount of people that can see your movie, because ultimately, yes, your family might have it be where you've seen rated R films for a lot of your life. You might know families that bring their kids or bring their teenagers who aren't quite old enough yet to go see a film that is rated R. But most people, especially when we talk about North America and, again, other countries around the world where you might have some more traditionally minded persons, probably aren't going to be as comfortable with that. Also, Europe in general, I feel, tends to be a little bit more cautious with kids and exposure to violence versus that of other things, right? Basically, there's a huge cultural difference, right, between European standards, European norms, and that of North American norms. And so I think that also has a factor to play in it also. But regardless of any of that, the big difference there, international, right? That movie, Inside Out 2, has just crossed $1 billion international, which again, they're going to continue to run with these nonsensical items of, oh man, it's the first ever animated film to get $1 billion international. Yes, without accounting for inflation and financial, like, again, the rate exchanges, etc. It's like, okay, I'm sorry. Like, there have been other films that have been able to get upwards to that number, but obviously the first two on paper, without adjusting for anything, get $1 billion. Again, very impressive feat. But as you all know, always drives me crazy when they are trying to basically create records, or at the very least be disingenuous when establishing and representing and mentioning any of those records. But back to Deadpool and Wolverine, doesn't take anything away from this movie. 1.2 billion is very impressive, not only for any film really in 2024, but especially for a rated R film. Alien Romulus getting upwards of $225 million. So this film doing much better internationally than domestically, still tracking well enough to where $100 million domestic is on the table. Obviously, a lot more money to be made there internationally, but $225 million, definitely a good number for it. But remember, whenever you're making a lot more money internationally, you do need to make a lot more in order to break even, right? So typically we talk about most films having a break-even point these days, probably closer to 3 times the actual budget of the movie, right? The range that I always say is between 2.5 and 3.5 probably. It really depends on how much money was spent on the movie. It talks about how much money was spent on the marketing. Are you talking about typical marketing cost, more than typical marketing cost? But also, and really, I think the most important factor is, where do you make your money? Because if you make most of it internationally, you're getting a lot less back on that money. So you need to make a lot more there to make back the same amount of money, or even more in comparison to what you need to make in the domestic marketplace, right? So that's why you typically want to see a higher, or at least comparable, domestic box office versus international for a higher budgeted film. $80 million, definitely not the highest budget out there, but hey, they still definitely want to have a bit more money coming from the domestic versus international, but still looking like it's going to be a pretty good final result for Alien Romulus. We'll talk about that towards the end of the video. It ends with us still doing very well, $242 million. Very interesting to hear some of the controversy surrounding this movie, about how Blake Lively has been promoting it, and been promoting it as something that the film just is not. Again, very, very weird. The director, someone who stars in the film as well, obviously taking it a bit more of a serious and a much more serious approach and tone with it also. You wouldn't think from the marketing of this movie also and the conversations that it has much to do with like violence, but apparently it does. So, hey, people still going to see this film, even with that whole debacle and in that whole back and forth conversation going on. So, hey, kudos to them for making money there. Blink Twice. This is a film from Zoe Kravitz as a director, and apparently it is an interesting premise, but ultimately gets caught up in its own messaging, trying to preach to the audience. Just what everyone wants to see in a movie, especially one starring Channing Tatum. Again, I don't quite understand why these films keep being made, but hey, only $14 million made on this film opening weekend. A lower budget might mean this film has a chance to maybe make its money back, but based off of where we're seeing this film doing now and also how the word of mouth not being very good for this movie, again, shout out to the people over at Film Threat for kind of, exposing and talking about this. And again, I'm sure a lot of other people talking about this also, but it's good for that kind of stuff to be exposed out there because then, hey, people know, yeah, let's not support movies like this. But again, 14 million, definitely not all that impressive, even if a break even might still be on the table. The Forge, as I mentioned before, faith-based movie, seems to be doing okay, $6.6 million there for this movie because it's an independent film. Again, a little bit harder to sometimes find all the information you need as far as budgets are concerned, but also these independent films at smaller screens, right, under 2,000 screens are a little bit harder to track also. So I won't be doing too much coverage of this film, but I did want to mention it because obviously it did break into that top 5 discussion. What did not break into the top 5 discussion this week was The Crow. That's right, The Crow, 4.6 million domestic. No international numbers being reported as of the recording of this video. We'll go ahead and just pull that tab up too, because let's see, it is supposedly having released in Argentina. We'll be releasing in a few days in Australia, a little bit later in Austria, has already released in Brazil, Bulgaria, next week in Czech Republic. You all have current releases right now in Finland, France, later on in Germany. I don't think that those later countries are probably going to make that much of a difference for this movie, but it's been in enough countries where, when you typically, and I mentioned this last week as well, when you have an opening weekend like this and you are not getting those internationals right away, usually that's indicating those internationals do not look all that good, so they are not being very quick in their reporting on the numbers. 4.6 million is atrocious, and from what I hear about this movie not even really being The Crow, again, serves you right at this point. Inside Out 2, $1.64 billion. Again, essentially getting very, very close to 1.7. Could even walk away with it. And as you see right there, that $1 billion unadjusted number versus the $646 million domestic. So very, very impressive no matter which way you look at it. So this film, again, $200 million budgeted movie, 8.2 times that budget. So looking very good as far as overall profits are concerned. And speaking of that, let's go over to the chart because we love charts here on OMB Reviews. And so The Crow costing $50 million. Yeah, that's right, $50 million with marketing added on to that, right? Usually marketing is about 1.5 times the budget. So a total cost for the entirety of the movie, both budget and marketing, around $75 million total, means the break even traditionally would have been 125. In today's market, we're talking probably closer to 150 to $200 million is the actual break even point. This movie is not going to get anywhere close to either of those, right? We can say right now, as of the recording of this video, looking at around $72 million in the red, right? Really no difference whatsoever between the 2.5 multiplier and a more accurate take with the 55% cut domestically. Once we start getting some international numbers, obviously that number will change a bit, but I suspect this film will definitely be losing north of $50 million. Not the biggest box office loss of the year, but compared to one's budget, definitely going to be one of the worst performing films to come out this year. Blink Twice only cost around $20 million, so again, more of a smaller budgeted film here, so it does not have to make nearly as much back to break even because it is making about an even split between domestic and international, at least as of now. It's sitting around negative $23 million, so that's why I mentioned before, is there a chance for this film to make its money back? There's a chance. Again, $23 million to make back isn't really that much money. You're not making a whole lot in the first place, though, right? A $7 million opening weekend, $6 million opening in the international market. Something tells me you're going to have massive drop-offs after next weekend, or rather not massive drop-offs by next weekend because of some of the word of mouth and also just because of the kind of messaging that no one ever really wants to have preached at them. So I think that will probably be an impact in the long term for this movie. So again, if I had to guess right now, I would say the film's going to lose money, but again, never say never in that regard. Alien Romulus reaching $225 million means the film right now is around $18 million in the red. And again, a lot of that's because of how much more money it's made internationally versus what it has made in the domestic. But we can make some projections now because we do have the second weekend numbers. As you all know, we can usually be pretty accurate with projections as far as the total range is concerned of a total box office, the final box office of any film, once we have those first 2-week numbers, right? So at $225 million, we can project the film will make somewhere worldwide between $322 million and upwards of $450 million. Now, we're not seeing it get the kind of drops that it would need to get to $450 million, right? So I think that number we could easily say is off the table. But 322 to 386, I think we're definitely looking more realistic there. I would not be surprised to maybe see it get upwards of $350 million. But again, I'm going to probably end up leaning more towards that lower end number because though you do have a lot of positive praise for this film and a lot of people having fun with this movie, having a 60+% drop for a film of this size and also having the hardcore fans of the Alien franchise almost universally, right, when it comes to the hardcore fans at least, almost universally pan this movie and not like it, that is, I think, going to affect it down the road quite a bit. And so that's why I do think it's not going to make as high of a number as what it could have if it had actually been a film that everyone was loving across the board. That being said, we're looking at a end final result of it making between $73 million in net gain profit and $150 million in net gain profit. Again, that's using a 2.5 multiplier there, and so we'll probably have to scale that down to be closer to 50 to 100 million if everything happens the way that it is likely going to. Still, that is a break even. That is a good $100 million in net gain profit. And that is enough to pay for the budget of a future film based on that $80 million budget, right? So probably not making its money back and then some, right? Not making its money back and potential marketing costs, but still doing very, very well. There's just no way around that. Alien Romulus is not going to be a box office flop for this year and will be ultimately a win for them. So, hey, got to give kudos and credit where credit is due. Where we cannot give any credit at all is ultimately what's going on with Borderlands at $22 million. Yeah, this film is already done. $161 million in final losses for that. It ends with us. $77 million in net profit as of the recording of this video. So very impressive. Look at that split too from the domestic international, 120 versus 121. So that's pretty impressive there. A much smaller budgeted film too. So again, kudos to them for making some money on that project, despite the fact that they seem to have had some false marketing, or at least on one portion of the marketing for the film had some false marketing. Trap at $71.5 million. Again, as I mentioned, nearing the end of its run. Still around $10 million in the red, so probably not make its money back, but also not the biggest loss in the world for Warner Brothers, so could easily make some money back post-theatrical, as oftentimes can happen, especially when it comes to Blu-ray sales, or eventually, right, if it's not going to HBO Max, if they're able to, sell the rights to international streaming rights, for instance, you could potentially see them make some money there. But again, as far as the theatrical is concerned, we can say pretty safely, not going to make its money back. Deadpool Wolverine, $1.2 billion. That's right, $262.4 million in net profit. Very impressive for this movie. Despicable Me 4 still making money as well, $885 million worldwide, $248. So looking like this film has a chance to maybe cross $900 million worldwide before the end of its run, but it's slowing down quite a bit. So again, that's a bit of an outsider chance at this point. But again, never say never. And then the last thing I will mention is Inside Out 2 at $1.64 billion, because this film has made $449 million in net profit. Probably seeing this film now cap out around $450 to $500 million in net profit. So just darn right impressive, right? So we're looking at that film getting to between 450 and 500. Looking at Deadpool Wolverine probably ending closer to 300 million. So that's around 800 million in just net profit alone just from those two movies. Alien Romulus is now in that discussion too, and since that film is looking to be able to make at least 50 to 100 million, we're looking at that also adding to its overall totals. And so yeah, you have 900 million plus being made just from those three movies alone, and yeah, that's going to be enough for it to make up a huge portion of their losses from last year. Definitely not all of them from last year, but quite a bit. And this is not even taking into account any future sales or deals they might make post-theatrical. If they're going to go straight to Hulu or Disney Plus, not going to make a whole lot of money there. Obviously, Disney will try to double count it in some way. They'll be like, oh, it's on Hulu, and, we're selling it to ourselves, and so therefore we made money. It's like, no, that's not how this works, okay? You can't just move it from one of your bank accounts to another and say you made money. It just means that you shifted your money around. But hey, these are the numbers as they stand. I guess one last one that I just remembered that I could talk about also is Twisters. Again, still very impressive that the film did what it did, but because of where the film ultimately spent its money, theatrically, it's just not going to make its money back. Theatrically, post-theatrically, whole different story there. Expect that film to make some money in those deals and sales after the fact. But those are the numbers as they stand. So what are y'all's thoughts on The Crow? Crow not doing well at all, looking to be one of the biggest box office flops of the year, just in comparison to its budget, but definitely not the biggest loser because they didn't spend nearly as much as other films, right? For instance, the likes of Borderlands, right? Spending way too much money on their film, or even the likes of Fly Me to the Moon, right? Also costing quite a bit of money as well, at least as far as purchasing the rights to said film. So what are y'all's thoughts on The Crow? Where do you think it's going to end up? And also, where do you think we're going to see films like Blink Twice or Alien Romulus end up? Alien Romulus guaranteed to make profit at this point, and a sizable amount of profit to boot, and it'll probably be profitable by the end of next weekend if I had to guess. So what are y'all's thoughts about that or anything else I mentioned? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, allow that fire button, or honestly smash the rumble button as well. Also, please again, make sure you're subscribed, hit that bell. You guys seriously are amazing, beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed, blessed Sunday. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members here during the month of August, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illich and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And also to the K-Man. Check out his website, xtheboundaries.co. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed August, and as always, God bless.